Hello, everyone. Come on in tonight. I know I started a minute early because I want to give you a minute to come in tonight. I want to give you time to share and have a watch party with all your people tonight because I have a fantastic person that I'm interviewing tonight, and I want to give you a chance to get on. We have been doing a series on women leading around the world, wow, for the past couple of months. And we have been to every continent except for Antarctica. We have started in the United States, and tonight we end in the United States. And so the person we have on tonight is absolutely fabulous. So as you come in, let me know that you're here so I can see that you're here. And I know, like I said, it's a little early, but I just wanted to hop on tonight because I'm so excited. I am so excited about this woman of God, who this woman is, not only who she is, but the work that she is doing. So I see you coming in. As you come in, type your name and let me know you're here. Let me know you're here tonight. Let Karen know you're here. This is our last part of the series of women leading around the world. And I really saved this woman to be the person to bring us out of our series. Hi, Ronalda, to bring us out of our series tonight, because she's in the United States, but she has a global impact. And I'll talk about a little bit more about her in a few minutes. But as we get started tonight, I wanted to make sure that I gave tribute to an icon who we lost this past week, and that is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And so I want to talk about her just for a little bit before we start our interview tonight, because I think it's important for us to recognize contributions that women have made and are still making and that are going to be made. And I really believe that we stand on other people's shoulders. Hi, Ronalda. Hi, Karen. Ronalda, Karen, that's Ronalda saying hello. But Karen will be in a few minutes. She's in the back studio. And so I'm going to pull her up as a queen that she is. So she is here tonight. So, but I just want to say that I always believe in acknowledging women that have come before. You know, I'm an attorney by background, by trade, practiced law for 30 years before I started doing leadership coaching and training. And so I appreciated every single woman that came before me who really paved the way for women in the law. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg was one of those women. She was one of those women who paved the way for women in the law. She paved the way for women at Harvard Law School. And there's some things that those women endured. They endured because they paved the way. So tonight, I just want to acknowledge a few things about her for those who don't know her. If you didn't see the movie a few years ago, I want you to, at some point, see the movie about her life because it's absolutely phenomenal. Not only does it show the type of mind she had and the type of person she was, but it also shows her life in totality in reference to her husband and her children, and really how supportive her husband was of her, who she, as she describes, was her greatest supporter. He also was a tax attorney. So Ruth actually, Bader Ginsburg, she married Martin Ginsburg in 1954. And they were in Harvard Law School together. She was a first-year student. I think he was a second-year student. And the story, I'm not going to give it all away, but the story is absolutely phenomenal. And I just want to give some highlights of her life. In 1959, not 1961, I wasn't even born yet, okay? She was a law clerk to the judge in the United States District Court in the Southern District of New York. In 1961 to 1963, she was a research associate and associate director of Project International Procedure at Columbia Law University. 1963, I want you to think about these time frames and where we were as women at that time. 1963 to 1972, she was a professor at Rutgers University School of Law. 1972 to 1980, she was a professor at Columbia University School of Law. She is the first woman to be hired at tenure at Columbia University School of Law. So she was always a trailblazer. She was general. Now, I didn't know this about her, and I didn't remember this about her. In 1973 to 1980, she was general counsel for the ACLU. So she was always about women's rights, always about civil rights, always about people's rights. In 1977, 1978, she was a fellow at the Center for Advanced Study in Behavioral Sciences. And in 1980 to 1993, she was judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. And it was in 1993, on August 10th, that she was sworn in as a Supreme Court justice, filling this seat held by Justice Byron White. And she has done phenomenal work since that time, both in her life and on the court. And so tonight, as I begin to interview this wonderful woman tonight, I wanted to acknowledge and pay tribute to the life of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And so we're going to get started tonight on our interview, and I am going to welcome now to the stage Miss Karen Robinson. Hi, Karen.
Hi, how are you?
I told everybody, I said, she is gorgeous. She's gorgeous in her own right. And tonight she's she's beaming. Karen, I'm so happy to have you tonight.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
You are so fabulous. I'm going to tell some people some things about you, but I'm going to let a lot of this stuff come out during our interview. But I want to tell everyone, when I met Karen, there's some people you meet and you have a connection with, and some people you meet and you just fall in love with. I just fell in love with this woman. I fell in love with her spirit, who she is as an individual, as a person. Her story is phenomenal. But what you chose to do, and I believe it's a choice, and so I'm using the word choice.
Yes.
What you chose to do with your life has just been phenomenal. Has been phenomenal. And what you're still doing. And I learned something tonight that will come out in the interview a little later that I didn't know because she just finished or just had some house guests that I didn't know about, but we're going to talk about that tonight. So Karen is the CEO of Solomon's Porch Women's Society, and we're going to find out about that tonight and what that is. And she's the director and founder of Ravens Hope International. This is a person, she's married, she has children, grandchildren, I know. And then we're going to find out some other things about Karen tonight, because Karen is the person who you look at and you say, how old is she? Yeah. But she was doing something this past year, and I kept watching her on Facebook and saying, whoa, okay, girl, you make us look really good. You make us look really good. But I love her spirit. So Karen, welcome to Women Leading Around the World.
Thank you so much. I am so excited about being here tonight. I couldn't wait. I watched some of your other episodes and I'm like, okay, I need to come with it tonight.
No, we are just going to have a wonderful conversation because I was telling Karen earlier that I was trying to figure out what am I going to do for the last interview? And I said, no, I started in the United States. I want to end in the United States, but I want to end with a woman who's having impact around the world. And Karen was the first person that came to mind. I said, she is the right person. So thank you for being here with us. Start out and tell us, who is Karen Robinson? Tell us about yourself. What were you like as a little girl? Who are you?
So I am a daughter of 10 children. My parents had 8 boys and 2 girls. My father left when I was 2. I always call myself a sister from the hood. A Negro from a Negro neighborhood. I was that little girl, and just my life took on a journey. It took on a journey growing up with boys. I was a tomboy. People thought I was a tomboy because I grew up with a lot of brothers, but I actually struggled because I was sexually abused at such a young age. And it was kind of hid behind the fact that I had a lot of brothers. So people didn't realize I lost my femininity because of sexual abuse, not because I had so many brothers. So just in that journey, growing up in a home where there was 8 boys and 2 girls, my brothers got into a whole lot of trouble. My mother was definitely a Wonder Woman and a superwoman. But in the midst of it all, she taught us how to get up. She taught us how to make right choices. She taught us that God don't count the times that we fall, but he counts the times that we get back up. She taught us that the hand that you are started with or the hand that you dealt isn't the hand you have to end with. So I learned to rearrange my hand and to set my life on a new journey, God was so gracious to give me a wonderful mother that was strong, but he also sent me mentors and leaders and pastors. And then he gave me a heart to submit. So my journey of transformation after everything we've been through, after losing a brother to a drug-related murder, after my father leaving when I was 2, after being sexually abused, one of the things that I realized that my life needed people, and I needed people to help me. And my mom taught us that we need each other. We're better together. And just submitting myself to people, to leaders, to teachers, to coaches, it helped rearrange, it helped change my life, and it helped me fall in love with purpose and my true authentic self. So my journey in life today is to fortify leaders and empower women to change the world. I want people to know their God-given purpose. I want them to walk in it, and I want them to execute it well.
Woo, girl, and let me tell you something. You are a phenomenal leader, leading the way in doing that. And you know, Karen, there's so many things that I love, and we're going to talk a little later about your book and some of the things that you're doing and that you've done. But I love the fact that you say you don't have to stay where you are. And there's a hand that we're dealt. And a lot of times there are things that we don't have control over in that hand, but we still have a choices that we can make in our life.
Yes.
Tell us how you went from the place of hurt. I mean, you know, with the, you know, sexual abuse and the place of hurt to the place where you were fortified. Because I heard you say a few minutes ago a lot about leadership and people in your life, and that we needed people. What was that journey like, and what role did people play in that journey for you?
One of the things I want to start off saying to whoever's listening is, you guys, people create a lot of hurt and pain, but people also create a lot of healing. Without people, there's no healing. Without people, there may not be any pain, but without people, there's no healing. And we need people to heal. And I remember first going through my journey, the very first thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to isolate. I wanted to cave. I wanted to protect myself. I wanted to build a wall that wouldn't let anybody in. But I didn't realize I was building a wall that wasn't letting me out. And I wanted to get out. And I remember just as a young girl, especially when I turned about 16 years old, I got to a point where I was very suicidal. I have built so many walls. I lost my voice. I was going to protect myself because I was sexually abused between the age of 8 and 12. So by the time of being 12 years old, I was trying to figure out with my own childlike mind how to protect myself. And I did what a lot of us did. I created a room that I lived in, a prison of my own that was called my safe haven, which really became my prison. And I remember wanting out because I was yet lonely in the midst of it. Those moments caused me to be suicide. And I remember started chipping away at the bricks that I built and the wall that I built and peeking out, wishing somebody would see in. And how at the age of 16, I knew that the only one that could see me, because I hid myself that well, I hid myself with baggy clothes. I hid myself by looking like a little boy. I did the best I could to hide myself, but God saw me. God saw me when nobody else could really see who I was, because I did good at hiding myself. God saw me. And I remember God sending a friend of mine and my sister to me at a very young age to tell me about the Lord. My father gave his life to the Lord, and he came after us, and my sister came after me. And I remember God coming into my life, and I remember telling God that it's more to it than this. I said, there must be more. And all I kept saying is, there must be more, and there must be more. And the scripture that says, he that hunger and thirst after righteousness should be fed. Do you know just that small thought of it must be more? God answered. And at 16 years old, I found out that there was a group of ladies at my church. I call them the church mothers because they were 60 and 70 and 80 years old. I found out that they were doing noonday prayer. And I didn't need a teenage God. I needed a grown-up God because I had faced some grown-up stuff. I needed Jesus. So I started going to those noonday prayers. And Barbara, those church mothers, they would say stuff like, come in the room, God.
I love it.
And you know, he that day didn't just come into the room of that building. He came into the room of my heart. And God began to do a transformation that I'll never, ever, ever, ever forget. And the thing that I learned in the midst of those church mothers is I learned a praying spirit. I knew I didn't have to have 7 keys and 10 steps and all the right words to say. I just needed a heart after God. And I can just say, come in the room. I didn't even have to know what to say, because the word of God says we know not what we should pray for or say as we are, but the Spirit make intercession. So I just learned to groan. You know, sometimes you
just groan.
And look, at that point, I grown my way into a healing.
Wow. Karen, that is so powerful, because, you know, there's so many people today. There are a couple things you mentioned in terms of needing people and relationships, and how sometimes when we build walls, because a lot of times we build walls, you're absolutely right, when we're hurt, but you're right, it does keep people out, and it keeps healing from coming in. But even in the midst of that, we had a God that found you.
Yes, he did.
Yes, he allowed you to found it. And it was through these church mothers.
It was church mothers. It was people. The crazy thing is, when you cry out to God, when you say, God, I need you, when you're hungry and when you thirst after God, God will send people. But when God sends people, you have to yield. Even if it's not the people you think or the people you desire for him to send, when he sends the ship, get in it. And God sent a ship. And the reason I'm using the word ship is because relationship. A lot of times we hear relationship, membership, we hear the word ship, but we don't pay attention to that small word at the end of relationship is ship, which is a vehicle that takes you from point A to point B. So God sent me a ship, a friendship, a relationship. And relationships, therefore, transformation and destination. And God knew I had a destination, but I needed people that was different than me. I need people to come in my life to help me get to that destination and to help me go through my transformation so I can get there. It's that ship.
It's the ship. You heard that? It's the ship. Guys, I want to make sure that people are hearing this interview. Share, start your watch party, because we're going to go deep here, and we're going to hear about how this little girl went from a woman to a little girl to a woman that God fashioned, like he fashions all of us with purpose. Before we were in our mother's womb, before our mothers even thought about us, he said, I knew you. And he created us, he sanctified us, and he anointed us with purpose. So we're going to hear how this little girl grew up into purpose. Yes, there were some things that happened that were no fault of her own, but God said, I know the path that you take. I know the path that you take. And when your faith is tried, you're going to come forth as gold. And she has come forth as gold. So Karen, tell us about, so you're growing up, and tell us, when did you get to this point where you started thinking about purpose or thinking about your path and what that journey was going to look like?
You know what? I met a few key people in my life. I feel like everybody is key people, but there were some people that really changed the whole trajectory of what God was doing in my life. First of all, it was my 7th grade teacher. I had a 7th grade teacher who just wanted me to run track, and I began to run track and cross country. And this woman, she began to take me outside of my neighborhood just to cause me to see different. She understood that we are an environment we are a product of our environment, and sometimes we can't dream any bigger than what we see. So she just began to take me outside of my neighborhood, and I just began to see. I began to look around the world and just see something different than I've never seen before. And I began to have desires and dreams that I hadn't had before. So she was the first person that God brought into my life. And then later, God brought me a pastor's wife by the name of Carolyn Cofield, who really took time to just really pour into me. And the thing that I love about this woman is she wouldn't let me look like a little boy. She refused to let me look like a little boy. I had my high top tennis shoes on, my baseball cap, and she began to, and I'll talk about that later when I talk about my book, A Time to Heal, Heel, because she took me to put on my first pair of heels. And that's when transformation began to take place, when I began to dream and I began to see and I began to submit. And I'm going to say that over and over again. I began to submit. You guys, the thing that we don't understand is that when you tie to somebody else's destiny, it's not an infringement of yours. It's a guarantee.
Woo! Say that again. Karen, say that again.
When you're tied to somebody else's destiny, or when you team up with somebody else's destiny or dream, it's not an infringement on yours. It's a guarantee of yours. And that's how my destiny began to unfold, is because I planted myself into somebody else's soil and I began to flourish.
Ooh, girl, I this is so powerful because there's so many people today, Karen, that they're so afraid to tie themselves to somebody else's soil. They're so afraid that someone's going to take something from them. And a lot of times God's sending people in our life to deposit in us, not to take from us. But it does, you have to be in the place of being willing to submit. You have to be in the place of willing to submit.
And it's funny that you say the word take, because one of the things that I teach my audience and I teach my client is give everything you have away. Nobody can take the tree. Let them take the fruit. They have to take the fruit. That's why you produce them, because they're going to fall and you're going to reproduce more. They can't take the tree. Give them the fruit. That's why they come.
Karen, I want you to talk about that, because let me tell you, in business and in life, I believe that this is why a lot of people are stagnant, because they're so afraid of somebody taking. But this distinction between the tree, the fruit, and the tree is significant because people were meant to take the fruit. You want them to have the fruit.
Right.
And so what God's given you is not something that somebody can take. Yeah.
And
so what would you
go ahead?
Go ahead. No. What would you say to women out there or people out there who have that fear?
I would say if you consider your life and your gift and your talent as a fruit, you realize that every year the tree reproduces. So it's going to reproduce, because if it don't, you'll end up with a lot of rotten fruit laying around your tree. And the buzzards will come and they will pick them. But if you give them away, if you pluck the fruit, more will come. And like I said, nobody can ever take the tree. If you just concentrate on keeping the tree planted in the soil, keeping the tree nourished, it will bring forth. Because let the truth be told, people don't come to see the tree anyway. They come to see the fruit. So one of the things that I realize is people aren't impressed by me, but they impressed by what I produce. So it's so important for you to keep producing and you keep giving so people can come see the tree. Because otherwise the tree isn't important at all.
Wow. I want you all to take in what this woman is saying right now, because as we begin and as we go deeper into this interview, you're going to see that her life has produced exactly what she's talking about. She's not just talking, she has produced. So take us on the journey, Karen. Take us on the journey of this purpose journey you're on. You begin to meet these people. They begin to sow into you. Even these church mothers, for those of you who don't have appreciation for church mothers today, they are significant. But if I listen to you, Karen, I can hear and I can see why you have been able to do the things you do. So tell us about that. Tell us on the journey in the way that however you want to go with what you're doing and how you got there. So you're a young woman.
I'm a young woman. I'm heading to the church every day for noonday prayer, especially in the summer, walking all by myself. As I'm walking down those streets, I'm singing, "My soul loves Jesus and I need thee." I'm walking every day. And in those moments, a transformation is taking place that only God can give. And dreams and the world is being opening wide open to me. And God is just growing me up. God is just causing me to be okay. God is causing me to love me. God is teaching me things that I just couldn't learn by myself, that I couldn't learn with a textbook. I couldn't even just learn from the Bible alone, but it took the word of God and conversations with God, which is prayer, to birth some of the things that God has birthed on the inside of me. So it was in those moments that God began to stir me up and I began to long for more. But Barbara, the funny thing is, as I longed for more for me, I started longing for more for others. So as God gave me more, I wanted the people around me to have more. It's almost like when the Bible says taste and see, or when you have a piece of candy or you have something and you want your girlfriend, your family to see it. It was that type of thing. God had took the little girl that had been sexually abused, the girl that lost her voice, the little girl that looked like a boy, the little girl that thought she had nothing to say. And he started giving me something to say, and he started giving me dreams, and he started giving me desires. But I wanted the people around me to have desires too. I knew it wasn't for me alone. I knew God was bigger than me. So I started saying, I'm going to share. I'm going to share. I didn't know much, but I knew a little. So I started sharing. And in that sharing, I remember I started sharing with my husband the pillow talk because I was afraid of talking at first because I was just afraid just after everything that happened to me. And I remember one day laying on doing our pillow talk, my husband and I, he was like, "That is good. You should tell somebody." I was like, "Tell somebody?" He's like, "No, you need to start saying this out loud." I was like, "Out loud?" He's like, "Yes." So at church, I got brave. I started talking. Sunday school, I started talking. Bible study, I started talking. And my leaders, they noticed my life, but they also noticed my conversation and the transformation that had taken place. And they started asking if I can talk. They like, "Can you teach the teenagers? Can you teach the children?" And I started teaching. I just started teaching the children. And I was like, okay, I think that's good. They keep coming back. So the more I talk, the more God brought an audience. It's almost like the tree. The more I produced, the more people came.
This is so good, Karen, because you said, when you talked about submission, and then there were so many times when you said yes. So realize that when people come and ask you to do things and say, "Can you teach? You have to say yes first. Mm-hmm. Before you can get into that place, you have to say yes. And realizing that even as you were saying yes in that time, whether we know it or not, we're saying yes to God. Mm-hmm. We're saying yes to God.
The thing when I teach about purpose, I tell you that God give you purpose, but people help you discover it. The challenge is purpose lives down on the inside of us, and we're more purpose than we are person, that sometimes we overlook it. So the people that's looking at us, they can see our purpose. We can't see it because we're trying to find it out there when it's in here. So when God sends people into your life that asking you to do stuff, they're watching your fruit and they're seeing you bear fruit. So they're asking you to deliver based on what they see and based on their purpose. So one of the things is they're doing is they're giving you an assignment. The assignment comes from God. A lot of times we talk about purpose. Purpose is why. Our predestined is who we were created to be, but our calling is what we were created to do. And the Bible says in Ephesians, the 4th chapter, to walk worthy in the vocation wherewith you are called. But our vocation comes from the teacher, from the pastors, from the leaders, because sometimes it's just an assignment. And the assignment begins to unfold what's down on the inside of you. You don't pass the assignment, you don't pass the grade, you don't pass the grade, you don't graduate, and you don't get to move into the next. So those assignments are so necessary, and sometimes they just come from the teacher.
Wow. This, Karen, is so critical because we have to understand that there is a purpose and a reason for teachers in our lives, for pastors, for women of God, for men of God that come along, for people that come along and deposit. And a lot of times we give a lot of pushback. Sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of not understanding the idea of submission, not understanding the idea. Now, I know if you're walking with the church mothers, okay, and you are submitting to these people that God began to send into your life, along with that comes correction. Along with that sometimes comes chastisement because God says those that he loves, he chastises, he corrects, he rebukes. If not, you're a bastard. So tell us about how you handled that as a young woman seeking God.
So I grew up in the Church of God in Christ. So
all right. Hold on. Hi, Missionary Holloman. I know you heard that. Church of God in Christ. Go ahead.
So I grew up in the Church of God in Christ, and it was a time when we could not wear pants. But somehow it was transitioning. In the church that I was in at this particular time, there was a lot of young adults and young people coming in, and they were coming in their pants. So I wanted to wear pants too. And my pastor's wife, and she said, "Karen, I don't know why." She said, "But you can't wear pants to church." She said, and I was the only young adult, only young teenager coming to church with a dress on. Everybody else had on their cute little clothes and their jeans, and I'm in my dress. But I submitted to that. She said, "I don't know why, but God said, too much is given, too much is required." But for what God was doing in my life, because he was calling me to fortify leaders and empower women to change the world, he needed to know if I can submit. He said, if you can't submit and if you can't follow, you can't lead. So at a very young age, God was just teaching me how to lead. A lot of times people think you're following, but you're learning to lead. So as you're following, you're learning to lead. So he was teaching me how to learn how to lead. So I submitted.
So I want people to hear this, because I want you all to understand it wasn't even about dress code. Because really, the other girls or the other people that were coming, the young people, like Karen said, they were wearing their cute little stuff,
and they loved
God. Absolutely. So God knew what he was trying to pull out of you.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I want to see if you will submit. Mm-hmm. Because your submission, when you say yes and you submit, Karen was saying yes to so many other things in our future that we have no idea. So continue on your journey. Tell us about your journey.
And one of the things too, I want to talk about submission. You guys, the word submit, the word is sub. So you're just coming up under the mission to help it come. So you're just coming up under the mission that you're called to, or that God has at the moment. And you're just helping, again, transition it to that place. But even then, I submitted. And as I submitted, God began to open doors for me. So my pastor's wife started allowing me to travel with her. She started me to go with her. And as I traveled with her, I had the opportunity to sit in the room with some very strong leaders. I began to hear, and I learned a lot about leaders. I learned leaders are smart. And I learned that especially godly people, anything you tell them, they already know. You quote a scripture, they already know it. But sometimes they just need to think out loud. Sometimes they need to think out loud. And sometimes they just need a safe place. Because sometimes it sounds so good in here. But when you get to process it out loud and say it out loud, you get to answer your own questions. So God, at that particular time, after I watched leaders, he allowed me to become a sounding board, to just listen to them. I ended up being a safe place for leaders. Pastor's wife, my own pastor's wife, began to trust me with her own journey. Then her friends and people around me and other leaders began to trust me with their journey, because they knew I was a safe place that I would let them process out loud. I wouldn't discredit what they've been through. They didn't lose anything from sharing with me that they wasn't happy today, or they were frustrated, or they were irritated, because they were just thinking out loud. So I became that place where people think out loud. And I remember in 1997, God spoke to my husband and I, and he told us to move to Nashville for the next phase of ministry. And at that particular time, we had no idea what that meant, but we moved to Nashville. And when I went to Nashville, God said, Karen, he said, in Nashville, he said, I want you to still submit to the pastor's wife, to the woman of God. So even when I went to Nashville, I went looking for a woman of God to submit to. Still, by this time, I'm 33 years old, and still saying submit to a woman of God. So we looked for a church. We didn't look for a church. We looked for a woman of God. You guys, I am a Black woman, as I said, a sister from the hood. So we visit a few Black churches, or predominantly Black churches, and God sent us to a white one. And I remember walking into that church, and that woman of God stood up, and oh my gosh, it was like butterflies. My husband said, that's her, isn't it? I was like, it's a white woman.
I love it. I love it.
And I remember she came down. She was doing meet and greet, telling all the visitors, to all the members, to stand up and greet the visitors. And she came down and she said, when I saw you, she said it was like Mary and Elizabeth. She said, I need God to send somebody to walk alongside me. She said, I think you're her. And that moment scared me so much. I left that church and I didn't go back. I didn't go back for almost 6 weeks. And God said, go back. And we went back and I submitted again to that journey. And as I was submitting to that journey, again, God began to open more doors and give me a new audience. And I began to meet her friends and her peers and her pastor's wives and her friends. And the pastor was Jill Chambers and Danny Chambers. And he sung. Pastor Danny wrote over 2,000 songs. So I began to travel with them. So God even began to put me before their audience. And again, I'm tied to somebody else's destiny. And God is causing me to be planted in their field and to come forth. So in that season of my life, I began to continue to come forth. And in that, God spoke to me about just starting an organization. I thought a Bible study and a ministry called Solomon Sports, because at this time I started getting calls from pastors' wives and leaders and people of influence. My husband is a television producer and editor. So some people in television start calling me. I became a sounding board, because that's what I did for so many pastors' wives and so many leaders. So I became a sounding board. And God said, Karen, he said, I need you to create an audience of one, pull them all together, because I became a professional lunch goer. I was going to lunch. here, there, here, there. And God said, no, pull them together. So I thought, okay, I need a cute name. And I wanted to name, I don't know, Sisters Pearl, Sisters Inspiring Sisters, something pretty, Princess, High Heels. And I heard God say Solomon's Porch. And I was like, absolutely not. Solomon don't need any more women on his porch. I was like, no, it's too masculine. I don't think so. And I ignored that name. But you guys, I was in Nashville, a county called Davidson County. And one day my pastor got up and he said, we are in Davidson County. He said, who is the son of David? Well, he was talking about David, son of David. He's talking about Jesus. He's talking about David. And God said, who is the son of David? And God said, Solomon. And God said, Solomon. So I heard that again. And I thought, no, thank
That's
you.
not going to be my name.
That's not going to be my name. Right, exactly. So I began to read the Bible, searching the scriptures, and just trying to, like, God, what do you want me to call this? So my pastor got up 2 weeks later and he began to read from the book of Acts. It wasn't his message, but he read, wonderful works was done on Solomon's porch. And he kept going.
Woo, Karen.
No, I said no. I was like, I'm not using that name. Good for Solomon. And I ignored it. So by this time, I'm asking girlfriends and friends, help me come up with a name. I have all these women I'm meeting. I want to gather them in one place. I had a day. It was May 15, 1998. I wanted to send out invitations, but I needed a name. Well, God spoke to me, Barbara. He said, I want you to go visit your grandmother, whose mantle I've given you. My father's mother was a pastor. And her dad was a pastor. He said, I'm giving you the mantle of your grandparents. Go visit your grandmother. My grandmother was about 100. She lived to be about 103, 105.
Wow.
So he said, go to Kansas City, visit your grandmother. I'm giving you her mantle. So this is all in between me trying to come up with a name. So I go to Kansas City. I get to Kansas City. My grandmother, tiny little woman, laying on her bed. When I walked in her room, there wasn't a lot of goosebumps. I didn't feel the blowing of the wind, the moving of his spirit, but I knew I received a mantle. And my grandmother got up out of her bed and we began to pray. And she took me into her living room and she opened her photo album and she showed me a book where her and my grandfather used to pastor in a town called Holiday, Kansas. My grandmother is a white woman and my grandfather is Black. And in that time, just interracial dating didn't work. So God said, Karen, I'm calling you to racial reconciliation. I'm calling you to leadership and I'm calling you to prayer. So as I knew I loved praying because I got that from the church mother, but the leadership of pastors. So when I left my grandmother's house, I left with a threefold mantle: prayer, racial reconciliation, and leadership. So now I'm back I'm back in I don't even know, Cambodia and where I live. So I'm back in Nashville with this mantle. And as I have this mantle, I'm praying now, God, all right, I need a name because my friends didn't come up with one. I didn't have one. And I don't like Solomon's Porch. So I'm on my knees praying. And God said to me, he said, Karen, what is the name of your grandfather whose mantle I'm giving you? My grandfather's name is Solomon.
Karen. Karen.
And God said, the reason why I named it, I'm calling it Solomon's Porch. He said, because I'm calling you to high profile women. He said, I don't want you to usher them into another activity, another event, another charity, or another charity event. He said, I want you to usher them out on my porch to feel the breeze of my spirit. And I found out that the Solomon's Porch was next to the court of the women, which also was next to the beautiful gate, which led to the court of the women. He said, I want you to usher them out to feel the breeze of my spirit. So we started Solomon's Porch in 1998. Helping your high profile women, your coaches' wives, your NBA players' wives, your pastors' wives, your leaders, just providing them a safe place to come out, to sit and feel God's presence.
Wow. Now Karen, there's so much in this because, well, you finally obviously accepted the name. You accepted the name because God had purpose in that name.
Yes.
And he knew from day one why he was giving you that name.
Right.
And as I heard you say, even when you were talking about the church leaders, you said this several times, God really did make you a safe place because you have to be a safe place for people to be able to come and talk and for you to be able to interpret that they just need a place to talk. They need a place to unload. And you were that place. And everybody is not called to do that. Everybody cannot do that. So as you begin working with these high profile pastors' wives and NBA players' wives and people of stature. What did God birth from that? What else did God birth?
So even in that, God really really letting me realize that I'm called to fortify leaders and empower women to change the world. So the word women, he just really kept saying women. He said, Karen, he said, the same way I came after you and I pulled you out of that room you built that you call protection, that was really a prison. He said, I want to come after a lot of women. And I remember my pastor's wife, she invited me to go to Cambodia with her. And when she invited me to go to Cambodia with her, it was for a missions trip. And you guys, I'm like so many Black folks. I was like, there's a mission in my city. I don't need a mission. I can go there. My family is a mission. I can go help my cousins. No, that's what I was saying. And God said, Karen, let me put this in perspective for you. He said, when you telling me there a mission in your town, a mission in your country, he said, let me tell you what I'm hearing you say. He said, I'm hearing you say, my kitchen is dirty. Why would I clean the rest of my house?
Ooh!
He said, the whole world is my home. The whole world is my house. You don't just clean one room and be happy with having a clean kitchen and the rest of the house is dirty. So anyway, needless to say, I went to Cambodia, transformed my life. Barbara, I was in Cambodia, 7-day missions trip. And if you know anything about missions trip, they're very strategic. They're very intentional. They want you to see what they want you to see. They want you to hear what they want you to hear. So I'm in Cambodia on a missions trip. This missions trip rescued girls out of sex trafficking, girls 7 to 17. And I saw little girls, and I'm not exaggerating, I saw little girls 10 and 8 going into brothels with young men. I saw the worst of Cambodia in those 7 days. But for whatever reason, I knew God. He comes to see about us. I knew God has us there. And I hadn't been third world poor, but I've been American poor. I hadn't been in sex trafficking, but I've been sexually abused. And God has made me okay. So I knew God has us there. It's going to be okay. We're here. So in that 7-day missions trip, we saw the worst of Cambodia. But I remember on day 6, the leader of the organization, she's from Australia. She said, Karen, she said, when I was in America, she said, I heard you at a women's conference in one of your seminars. She said, speak on leadership. She said, I have my Australia staff, my Cambodia staff, and my American staff that will be here next week. Would you stay? Now that was right up my alley. She said, would you stay and do leadership? So I said, yes. But Barbara, when I said yes, I didn't realize the very next day, everybody else, including my friend, would get on an airplane and go back home. So the very next day, every single person, even the leader of the organization, got on a plane and went home. She introduced me to a translator, and then she went home. So for the next week, every day from 9 to 3 o'clock, I'm teaching leadership. And if you know anything about me, I'm teaching. There's nothing more frustrating to see it and hear and not touch it and feel it, and that's not God's intention. I'm teaching, don't die with your dream, your seed in your pocket, pull it out. And I remember my translator, she looked at me and she said, I dream. She said, I dream of seeing the modern country, but that won't happen for me. And I'm like, oh no, all things can happen, and all things can happen. All things are possible, and all things are possible to them that believe. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, yes, it can. And then one evening, I was eating down by the brothel, because that's where we were, our hotel. And I saw a girl, and I knew exactly what she was doing. And she began to just sit there waiting for a gentleman call her. And I asked her if I can eat with her. And she began to tell me her journey through sex trafficking. But the first thing she said, it's not for love. She was pretty much saying, don't judge me. She said, it's not for love. She said, my mother was sick. My sister died. She said, look around. She said, in your country, I hear your government help, your churches help, people help. She said, no one helps. She said, it's not for love. And then she began to cry. She said, when I go into the brothel, she said, he pulls me close and I cry because it's not for love. She said, I go from hotel room to hotel room. And she said, sometimes I lie there. And she said, tears fill my ears because it's not for love. She said, I dream of dancing and singing. And I remember on a plane heading home, and I'm thinking, what just happened? And God said, Karen, it's all for love. It's for the love of her mother, the love of her sister, and the love of her family, and the love of her country. He said, you don't know love in such an inhumane way. He said, but when I died on the cross, that was love in an unhumane way. And I'm journaling because I got a 24-hour flight home by myself. He said, I want you to bring women from Cambodia to America He said, I want you to, not because America is better than, but because America is different than. He said, I want you to teach them how to dream. He said, they are a product of their environment and they can't dream beyond. He said, just like you. He said, you couldn't dream beyond your environment, neither can they. He said, I need you to bring them to America so they can dream different. So I got home and I hit the ground running and started doing the 501c, the Ford, the website, everything I knew to do. I started Googling, Yahooing, talking to people. I'm going to bring girls to Cambodia, but I didn't realize it wasn't as easy as I thought. I didn't realize it's a third world country. There's no treaty between Cambodia and America, and they don't just get to come.
So you realize now it's just not that easy, but did you decide not to do it?
I never, ever decided to do it. I decided I'm going to go to Cambodia. You know what, honestly, Barbara, I think I was just so ignorant. Honestly, I didn't have time to, I think I was so in it that I didn't have time to process. I'm the type of person that, which is good and bad. It has its advantages and its disadvantages. I don't process long. Because if I process long, I process wrong.
Out. Yep.
I end up not doing it at all. So usually when God tells me to do something, I'm going to tell somebody because they're going to hold me accountable.
Right.
I'm going to start moving toward it. So I went back to Cambodia and I'm going to meet with the U.S. Embassy. Bless my heart. So I'm meeting because his heart's going to be broken as if this man didn't already know he lived there. Like he didn't know about his country, but his heart's going to be broken when I tell him what I encountered and how I need to help. So I go to Cambodia and I tell him that she said, it's not for love, but it's all for love. You know, I'm telling him all of this. And he looked at me and he's like, bless your heart. You know, he just pretty much, you know, said, what you're doing is good, but he told me the same story. Cambodia has no treaty with the U.S. and it's a risk and they don't let people from Cambodia to come to America. But you know what? God said, no, don't mean no. He mean ask again, ask somebody else and ask differently. God said, don't let anybody say no. So I walked out there hearing no, don't mean no. Ask again, ask somebody else and ask differently. So I called my translator. I said, invite your friends, because I knew nobody. I said, invite your friends to lunch with me. And I asked them, y'all want to come to America? Listen, I'm sorry.
You know what, Kara? Sometimes that's what I just knew talking to you tonight. This is going to be so powerful because Kara, you're like, I don't know. See, you didn't have all of these preconceived notions. You just like, hey, I know what God said. I know what I'm feeling. Hey, I'm just going to go over here and ask them, and I'm going to ask somebody else. Invite your friends to lunch with me. So what happens when you are in Cambodia?
So I invite them to lunch. They say they want to come to America. I bring them invitation letters. But then I thought, well, let me ask some missionaries or people, some Americans or Westerners about it. So I started telling them, hey, this is what I want to do. And again, they smiled. They said, that's not a good idea. They said, women in Cambodia are the sole providers of their country. If you take them out of their country, you're taking out the provision. They said, we don't suggest you do that. And I was like, I'm not taking them out forever. I'm taking them out just to empower them, to equip them so they can go back and be a greater provision for their family. And every single person I talked to said no. God said, no, don't mean no. It means ask again, ask somebody else, and ask differently. So I wrote the invitation letter. I raised money to pay for these invitation letters to get these girls' passports. I sent them to the U.S. Embassy for their interview. They went in excited. I was like, God said, no, don't mean no. So they went in there all excited. They came out with tears and not happy tears. They were denied. So I gathered them again. I was like, you guys, no, don't mean no. We're going to do this. Let's go back in. So I wrote another invitation letter. They went in again and they were denied. And by this time, I'm like, God, you said no, don't mean no. Ask again. Ask somebody else. Ask differently. So I'm like, okay, let's do it again. And you guys, by this time, I'm spiritualizing it. I'm like, Jesus rose on the third day. I'm like, the third time's going to be a charm. This is it. This is our resurrection. Go back in there. So they all go back in there. By this time, they're just tired. They're beat up. They're thinking, lady, we're fine. We never even dreamed of going to America. And now you got us tried. So they go in the third time. Another no, Barbara.
The third time, another. God, you're hearing this, right? The third time, another no. All
So
right.
I'm like, God, you said no don't mean no. I mean, ask again. Ask somebody else and ask differently. So by this time, I started Googling and Yahooing and anything interest search how to get to people to America. And I came across something that said you can get a congressional letter. So I emailed our congressman and I told him the same story I told you. I said, can I meet with you? I came in, told him the story. By this time, we had our 501c, we had our website, I had a brochure. I told him the same story I told you guys. And he was saying, he's like, well, it's a flight risk. People from Cambodia don't get to come to America. I said, okay. I said, well, would you try? I said, would you? I read that you can submit a congressional letter. I said, I know it's not your decision. I said, but would you submit the congressional letter? He said, yes. Barbara, I went home that night. I went to sleep. And I woke up with him in the morning to an email that was forwarded to me from the U.S. Embassy that came from Cambodia. And it said, tell your constituent, Karen Robinson, to send every girl back. Her visa have been approved. That was the first time in history that a group of girls from Cambodia was able to come to America. So in 2013, Raven's Hope started. And we started bringing young girls 18 to 30 to America for leadership training. We empower them, we equip them, and then we send them back to be agents of change in their country. At that particular time, the average income in Cambodia was $30 a month. Now it's about $160 a month. Our girls, just because they came to America, the American experience, learned and was empowering in America, our girls make anywhere from $350 to $1,500 because of their American experience. They have written books, they have bought homes, they own businesses. We have over 300 Ravens in Cambodia now. We've had about 52 to come to America, and we're still going strong.
Oh, girl. Look, now y'all know, now Karen, you know I've been trying to get to Cambodia with you.
Yes.
I'm telling you, after COVID, we could go to Cambodia. Karen, it's so important when we hear God and when he has put a desire in our heart, it's a mandate.
Yes.
Because I just don't believe that you would have gone through the nose, go home, seek out the congressional person without it being a mandate that God put in your heart. To a place where you initially said, what are you going to Cambodia for?
To the point, Barbara, there was a time where it was getting so hard, and I said, God, what am I fighting for? You know, they're at home, I'm at home. What am I fighting for? And God said, because their dreams matters too. And I fought for somebody else's dream. And I'm telling you, when you fight for somebody else's dream, God will fight for yours. And
Tell us about that. Stop right there for a minute, Karen. Say that again, because people need to hear that. Because, Karen, we get so much into ourselves. When you fight for someone else's dream,
God will fight for yours. And when I fought hard, when God knew I would fight for their dreams, not for an American experience, it wasn't a vacation I was fighting for. I was fighting for a dream. I was fighting for a purpose. I was fighting for a greatness that was down on the inside of us, on the inside of somebody. And God began to fight for mine. And little did I know, Cambodia is a third world country. Again, I told you that the average family throughout the country of Cambodia make about $160 an hour. Little did I know that there was a part of Cambodia that I hadn't seen before. And as I began to pour into this country and pour into Cambodia, God began to allow me to reap in Cambodia. 2 years ago, I met a man called Mr. Bora. Mr. Bora is the CEO of the CEO Master Club International. Let me back up. 2 years ago, God told me to train for American Ninja Warrior. He told me that if
wait a minute. Now, did you all hear that? This is what I was laughing. The Ninja Warrior. Now, you all know the show, the Ninja Warrior. That's what she's talking about now. Now, Karen, as you start out this story, tell us how old you were when he told you to train for this.
Okay, so I'm 55 years old. So I was 53 years old.
Gorgeous, isn't she? Okay.
And I was watching American Ninja Warrior with my Ravens. And I always tell my Ravens, you can do anything. So we're watching American Ninja Warrior while they're here. And I'm like, I can do that. They were like, why don't you do it, Mom? I was like, I can do it. Then I was like, I can do it. And God said, yes, I want you to do it. He said, I want you to train for American Ninja Warrior. I said, you want me to train for American Ninja Warrior? He said, yes. He said, I was like, so that means go to the gym. That means work out every day, eat right. He's like, yes. He said, let me put this in perspective. He said, I'm just asking you to train for a year. He said, if you train for a year, he said, I will open doors and I will bring visibility to Raven's Hope, and I would expand your platform. So in my mind, I think, yes, I'm going to train for American Ninja Warrior. I'm going to be on the Oprah Show, Good Morning Show, ABC, NBC. He's going to expand my platform and bring visibility to Raven's Hope. Okay. So do you know, a year to date, I'm in Cambodia and I meet Mr. Bora. Mr. Bora owns CEO Master Club. CEO Master Club, they empower about 20,000 business owners throughout the country of Cambodia. So all these years I've been going to Cambodia and I've been seeing the worst of Cambodia. I never knew that there were some billionaires and millionaires in Cambodia. So I meet Mr. Bora. He take me to his house and to his house. Well, I'm sorry, a little bug. He take me to his house and his community. And you got helicopter landing pads in his neighborhood. So here I am, Mr. Bora, in his neighborhood. So I'm teaching. He asked John Maxwell. He heard that I was a John Maxwell teacher, and he asked me if I would teach. He heard that I was training for American Ninja Warrior and asked me if I would teach. So I came to teach for him. And as I began to teach for Mr. Bora, he introduced me to his audience, and I became their liaison, and I became their advisor. And we opened CEO Master Club International in America, and I brought them to America. Now, Mr. Bora, every year, the CEO Master Club, they support the Ravens to come to America every year. But not only that, you remember I told you guys that give me a year and I will expand your platform and bring visibility to the Ravens Hope. So I go to speak at this event. And as I speak at this event, there's television stations. And I'm thinking, who's here? I'm asking my Ravens, who's here? Because every major television station, every major radio, and every major newspaper was there. And I'm like, who are they here to see? They're like, they're here to see you. From year to day, God expand my platform in the very country that I have been sowing in.
Woo! And see, this is so important, not with the mind of, I'm going in to sow so I can reap. I'm going in to sow so I can get. I'm going into sow so that I can help transform lives. I'm bringing these girls to America to teach them, to train them so they can go back home and they can transform their lives and their community. And while you're sowing into these other lives, God is saying, and I'm just storing up for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want everyone on here tonight to just really, because you're going to have to go back and you're going to have to listen to this interview several times, because there's so much meat here in terms of how we think, how we move through life, the motives of our heart. Karen, there's something that you say that I want you to explain, and it has to do with the cluster and the grape.
One of the things, my favorite all-time scripture, you guys, Isaiah 65:8. It says, the wine is in the cluster. It's not in the grape. The wine is in the cluster. It's not in the grape. If we are going to produce anything, or if we're going to produce the wine of the Spirit, or pour and do what God created us to do, it's going to be in the cluster. So one of the things that I realize is that I need people. And one of the things that I realize the best way to gather people around you is to empower them, to share, to give, and to give all of yourself.
All of yourself. Nothing, not holding, withholding nothing. Withholding nothing, people. Karen, I believe that even when we, like you said, as we go to help people, as we go to commune with people, to collaborate with people, to give your very best. Withhold nothing. You know how people sometimes think, I'm going to hold this a little bit for myself. And I believe that when you're holding stuff for yourself, you're actually losing.
Right.
You're actually losing because that's a closed hand. That's a closed hand. So tell us about your book. So I just love this.
So my book is called A Time to Heal.
H-E-E-L.
H-E-E-L. And the reason why it's called A Time to Heal, it is because it's my journey through sexual abuse. And you guys, my healing literally started with a pair of high heels. My pastor's wife, she decided she was tired of me dressing like a little boy. because I didn't realize that I dressed like a tomboy because it was my way of protecting myself. I lost my femininity because I didn't want anybody's uncle or sister or brother or father to bother me. So I figured if I wasn't pretty, if I didn't look like a little girl, you wouldn't bother me. And I got comfortable with my brother's clothes on. And she decided, I'm going to take you to put on some heels. So I began to put on a pair of heels. So uncomfortable for that moment, but it began to transform my life. And I realized healing was a choice. I realized that by this time I'm 30, 25, 30 years old, and I cannot keep being chained to an 8-year-old experience or a 12-year-old experience. I can't even be chained to last year's experience, whether good or bad. God is bigger than my worst experience, and he's bigger than my best experience. But I cannot be chained to a yesterday experience. And so I realized that I was chained. I was chained to that 8 to 12-year-old season of my life. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. For 5 years, I was sexually abused, but it impacted my life for 30 years, way too many years. I let 5 years do more than what 30 years is doing. And God said, oh, no, 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 no. And I began to release it. I began to give it to God. I began to share my journey. I began to allow people to speak into my journey. And it all started one day when the lady was telling her story. And she was actually teaching. And she said, I don't know why I'm about to go off script and off the lesson. She said, but when I was a little girl, I was sexually abused. And I'm trying to do, Oprah said, cry up. So the tears were on fire. I mean, by this time, tears streaming down my eyes. I'm like, oh, they know. And by this time, she's like, are you okay? I'm like, no, I'm not okay. I began to share my story. And through that journey, through the noonday prayer, through submitting to mentors, to leaders, to allowing people to instruct me, and to following their instruction, my healing took place. So I just talk about that in my book.
About time to heal.
Time to heal.
Tell us how we can get a copy of A Time to Heal.
So you can go to my website, Karen@KarenRobinson.com. That's my email. My website is KarenRobinson.com, and you can order my book. It's on my website. It's called A Time to Heal. KarenRobinson.com. Yes.
Guys, I want you to go. Now, I want you to go and I want you to get her book. This woman of God has laid so much out for us tonight, no matter where you started, no matter where you are, no matter what has happened in your life, to understand that when you tune into what God has for you, that your purpose will come to fruition. But there are certain principles that she's talked about tonight that are key. It's key to find those people in your life who you can submit to, whose mission you can come up under. It's important to connect with people and not distance from people. And Karen, I have a couple of questions for you. For my group, you know I'm going to be just a little bit late tonight. I got to finish these questions. There's a couple of questions I have for you. But I want us to, are you writing a second book?
I am. So I have A Time to Heal.
Yes.
I also have Strategic Leadership.
Yes.
I have a workbook that's called Come Forth, meaning putting a demand on whatever need to come forth in your season of life, a coaching session. But right now, I'm doing a coaching series called The I Journey. It's called The I Journey. It's helping you identify your purpose, identify your gift, and identify your audience. And then part 2 is becoming. It's teaching you how to do the how. And we talk about the walk, the cost, the thought, the talk, and how all of those are important in order for you to become and for you to walk your I Journey.
Right. And I believe, Karen, that the I Journey is on your website, correct?
Yes, it is.
I saw it tonight. So, guys, I say connect with this woman of God. Connect with her. The I Journey, it looks beautiful. It's on her website. You cannot even know the depth of the quality of what is sitting before you tonight in this woman of God. You've heard it, and I hear you all. I'm seeing your comments, and you know that this is powerful. And I believe, and I truly believe that God has given her to us tonight for this purpose of moving some of you. I want to speak to the audience right now. Some of you have stayed in the place where you are for too long. And God has put more in you. And there are a lot of reasons why we say that we are where we are. I want to encourage you tonight to go to Karen's website and become a part of the I journey. Because I believe that when you walk into that place, God is going to reveal to you. You know, he healed them as they went, Karen.
Yes.
And God shows up in our movement, not in our standing still and saying, God, show me, and then I'll go. He shows up in our movement. So, you know, when Karen talked about, I'm the kind of person I see and I just go, you know, and I did it in my ignorance. And he said, that's exactly the type of person that I can use.
And you know, one other thing, a word that God gave me to share with an audience, and I feel like I want to share with you all too. I was in a church in Chicago, and one of the things that God wanted me to explain to them is what they were feeling in this season. And I feel like for this audience also, I want to share with you.
Thank you.
You feel like that you're in a season where you just don't have your hand on it. You just can't seem to put your finger on it anymore. And God said what he has done and what he's doing is he's throwing your ball over the fence. God said there come a time in our life that he has to take our ball and he throws our ball over the fence. He said, because we won't play outside our own yard. He said, so sometime I force you. That's what he had to do with me. When he took me to Cambodia, he literally took my ball and he threw it over the fence. So God would take your ball and he'll throw it over the fence. It's not coming back. Nobody's going to toss it back over the fence. God wants you to play on the other side of the fence because the world needs to know you. Creation is waiting for the manifestations of the sons of God. Creation needs to know you. And creation is not in your backyard. Creation may not even be in your community, may not be in your house, may not be in your church, may not be in your city. But your creation is waiting for you, and it's on the other side of the fence. So if you're feeling like I don't have my ball in my hand anymore, go play on the other side of the fence. Creation needs you.
Drop the mic. I'm done. There's nothing else to say, but go to KarenRobinson.com, get her book, A Time to Heal, and joy and take the journey, the I journey. Karen, thank you.
Thank you.
I love you, my sister. God has made you, and he's brought you to the kingdom for such a time as this. And I know that eyes have not seen and ears have not heard. Neither has it entered into the hearts of man what God is going to do for you because you love him.
Thank you.
Thank you tonight. Thank you guys for being here. Make sure you share this. I know this is the greatest way to end this journey of women leading around the world with Karen Robinson. My queen, I love you so much.
Thank you.
And we will be in touch soon. Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us.